my second question for you is I wanted to ask you about RFK in terms of his dropping out of the race and endorsing Trump, whom they didn't have the kindest words for each other. Again, if your standard of holding people to their word about what they said in the past is being held to Kamala Harris for what she said 5 years ago, you should hold it against Trump and RFK for what they said weeks or months ago. But what do you think that is it going to have any effect in the race?
Well, it's interesting because nationally it suggested that more support was going to go to Trump than to Harris. But I looked at it, there was an analysis that was more state specific, and it actually said in the swing states that it would be net benefit to Harris. So this was really interesting. And the timing of his dropping out was no doubt coinciding with the Democratic convention, because once the wagons had been circled around her, RFK saw his support dropping considerably, because I think there were some Democrats or Democrat-leaning voters who were on the fence because of Biden. And then once everything consolidated, RFK said, oh, wow, there's really no lane for me. There was no way I was going to create enough insurgency to really win. And so the fact that he also put overtures to Harris, he even said that publicly. I tried to reach out to her and she didn't respond. I think that
for a bribe.
I mean, just in general, he said, I tried to reach out. I mean, hey, you said it yourself. That's the game of politics. People play politics.
I agree.
Quite normal.
Yeah. No, I was just going to say.
I mean, people primaries. I mean, Pete Buttigieg is transportation secretary. What the hell does he know about transportation? The only reason he's a transportation secretary is because he dropped out of the primary and he wanted a job and he wanted the platform. So that's normal. But he's not qualified for that role at all. So anyway, I think RFK asking for a job is normal. There's nothing, as though you calling it a bribe. I think that's not fair to him. But as far as, I think some of the things he said about vaccines, I disagree with that. I wasn't planning to vote for him. But I also know a lot of people on the right who liked the fact that he was opposed to government overreach during COVID, and I agree with that. I just spent the weekend with Dr. Jay Bhattacharya, who's at Stanford, and he was one of the creators of the Great Barrington Declaration that said really just common sense things like, let's not shut down the entire society. Let's just focus on the most highly vulnerable seniors. And these were just common sense things. And you had Francis Collins at that NIH trying to completely smear and discredit him, which is really sad because it was not based in science. It was really politically motivated why they tried to smear him and the other people who created it, which were scientists from Harvard and Oxford as well. And so for RFK to take that stand, I think that's why he got the admiration of a lot of people on the right for calling out government overreach. And also, honestly, I think Ron DeSantis should have made a bigger deal about that during the primary. I think that he could have gotten a lot more traction if he'd been more vocal in saying, hey, those government shutdowns, a lot of them were led by Trump. He was the one in the White House. So that's an aside. But as far as RFK, I think overall it's kind of a mixed bag. But what do you think?
Well, I would say, first of all, as far as Pete Buttigieg goes, he's also smart, capable, and not a whack job, which RFK, I think everyone would agree. And dropping is the term you use. That's very appropriate. He was dropping like a rock. He was even in the low 20s in some polls, and the recent ones that were more accurate had him at 2%. So he was going nowhere. And of course, there was always the debate, from whom would he take more votes? Trump, well, because they're similar in terms of their positions. But I still think in the end, things are so tribal that when people got in the voting booth, they would think Kennedy, Democrat. So he would have taken more votes from Biden. But I think overall it's a wash. And I think overall it's going to be inconsequential because he just wasn't going to add anything. And his own family has disowned him. No one who's really follows this seriously takes him seriously. So I think that it's going to be interesting. But I just want to follow up because you never really answered the question about what should Trump's position be on abortion, right? Because he said that he might even vote for that bill to expand abortion rights in Florida. And I know as someone who opposes abortion, even in the case of rape or incest, to hear Trump talk about reproductive rights, I'm sure, to put it kindly, was not exactly music to your ears.
Yeah, it was interesting. I was on a panel a couple months ago with Star Parker, who is one of the foremost pro-life activists in the country. And she hosts a talk show, and she had some other pro-life activists on the panel. And it was the night after the debate with Biden. And the whole panel was upset about Trump and the things he had said about abortion. So I thought it was interesting because I thought he runs the risk of suppressing pro-life enthusiasm for him. Overall, the panel said this is a president who put in those judges who took down Roe, so we're always grateful for that. But I think he is being consistent in that he's saying this shouldn't be a federal issue, just leave it to the states. And that's really something new in the sense that I think that's his way of trying to thread the needle, because he saw how abortion was a potent issue in 2022, but it's also consistent with the Supreme Court basically turning it back to the states. So I think in that sense, it's a savvy political move. I've also been thinking a lot personally about, social movements and the way that you move the pendulum in the right direction. And I honestly think the right should focus more on prevention, because the termination is really where the conflict's about. There are some on the right who are very, very Catholic who oppose birth control, but that is actually a minority among pro-life activists. And that is something that, in my mind, is not even close to the same thing as termination versus prevention from a theological standpoint, taking a life versus doing birth control. And that's something the Pope says versus what's in the Bible. To me, I put more weight on the Bible, because the Pope's the one who said, don't do birth control. There's nothing in the Bible about that. So, so there's a lot, there should be a lot more enthusiasm. What?
No, I was just going to say there's a lot of stuff that the Catholic Church preaches that's not in the Bible. But I actually agree with you. I think this is one area, and this is my gratuitous advice to the Trump administration. This is one issue where Trump can have his cake and eat it too, because I think he should do things he should vote for the abortion rights thing in Florida, and he should say that it's only in the states, and he should say that I'm going to stand up for reproductive rights, because if people criticize him, he can say, hey, who appointed the 3 justices that overturned Roe versus Wade? I did. So I think it's good strategy on his point. And also, we talked about this before. This is where I give you a compliment. One of my main problems about so many Republicans, it's Barney Frank's famous term, Republicans care about babies until they're born. And then these people who vote against any kind of abortion issue, they also vote against childhood nutrition programs or trying to assist low-income new mothers. So I think at least in that area, you're consistent. And that's, again, if I were Republicans, I'd say I'm against abortion, but I want to increase ABC to help people when they do have kids, make it a better life for those kids.